Very, very well played.
Thank you, sir.
That was incredible.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Great
Ladies
to
and
be here.
gentlemen, Mr. Jason Sutter.
How you guys doing?
Yeah, and as you can see here, we don't have a full kit. The lesson is all on brushes, and I was questioning how it would come across with just a snare drum, but that you filled it up. It sounded so good.
Thanks,
It
man.
was really cool.
Yeah, I'm trying to just, for me, it's fun to kind of just take a drum and really just get into it and just basically with a pair of wire brushes to just, really get into it. It's kind of a fun thing.
Very cool. Well, stick around, guys. The whole lesson is finding your voice on brushes, and Jason's going to share his tips and tricks and some cool techniques, I guess you can say, to really get some life out of your drums just with a pair of brushes. So it's going to be a really cool lesson. And if you guys don't know who Jason Sutter is, you're all over the place, man. You tour with, Smashmouth, Marilyn Manson, Foreigner, Chris Cornell. You're a clinician. You teach a lot of clinics and stuff. So you guys got to check him out. You can find him at jasonsutter.com, or you can find him on Instagram at Jason_Sutter. If you just go to his website, all of his social links are there. So be sure to follow him because you're a great drummer. And we've done some lessons already before this for Drumeo Edge, which will be online for all Edge members. So I can tell you're a very good teacher as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so huge thanks to all the sponsors that helped bring you out. Obviously, Ludwig, Remo, Regal Tip. Ron Dennett is in the back, and you're using a snare drum made by Ron as well. Not to mention the, let's see if I'm missing anyone here. Humes and Berg, Canopus Snare Wires, DW Hardware, and I already mentioned Remo, so thank you guys all so much. So again, guys, make sure you follow him online, and let's just dive into the topic. Finding your voice with brushes.
Wonderful. Well, what I'm going to cover today is mostly basically different basic patterns to more advanced, utilizing different strokes and that have worked for me. And ultimately, I'm going to start out by giving you the main three sounds we're going to use on a drum that I tend to use mostly, although there are thousands. The main three are going to be first the tap stroke, which is simply where you tap the drum. And with a brush, it's slightly unusual because you're actually snapping a little bit. So the brush kind of snaps down and hits the drum. You kind of snap. And that's a tap stroke. Mm-hmm. These are great also to use for rudiments, 4-stroke rough, a paradiddle, 5-stroke roll. So there's a lot of cool techniques you can work on, and those are really great because with brushes they don't bounce, so you're able to really utilize your fingers and your wrists and really work on those on that technical development. The second sound I'm going to use is a thup, T-H-U-P, where you're actually leaving the brush on the drum. So you get this kind of slightly muted effect that's with the tap can be very effective. So the tap, the thup. And the third stroke we're going to use today is the sweep stroke. And the sweep is basically the beauty of the brush where you can actually create a sustained, controlled sound. And that to me is really the beauty of the brush because as a drummer, we so often, are given the staccato tone, and the drum kind of dictates how long we're able to resonate and to ring. And I feel like with the brush, it provides a legato, a control of creating a legato or extended, elongated tone that you can control, and I think that really opens up a large amount of creativity for the drummer, and to kind of find your voice and to almost sing on a drum. It's a very lyrical way of being able to approach the instrument, and that's the wire brush. And I think often a lot of younger drummers kind of shy away from brushes because they're a little scared, or they just don't have the experience because they just haven't spent the time. So what I'm going to cover today hopefully will help some of you guys who haven't been hip to it. Hopefully teach you a lesson where you can, which is the first thing I'm going to show you here, is a tap stroke, which will kind of be a jumping off point where you can kind of, at least a place to ground zero where you can begin from. And some of you more advanced players maybe hopefully will find something in here that you guys can sink your teeth into. And then as we go, I'm going to cover some cool different sounds, some that you've heard maybe, some applications that maybe you haven't, and a couple little secrets that I got under my under my thumb that I'd like to let out here on Drumeo that are kind of fun that I don't think I've heard anywhere else, and so it'll be fun to kind of talk about those as well. So the first stroke is going to utilize the tap that we talked about and the sweep, the sustain. And basically, it's called the tap stroke. The left hand is just creating the sustain, which is basically, you want it to be as fluid as possible. And you want it to, in this case, I'm playing clockwise. The slower you are, the more of the drum you'll take up. The faster, the less, okay? You won't have as much time. So in this case, for this tempo, we're gonna do almost kind of like almost an egg shape. And this is our left hand, we're playing a sweep. With my right, I'm going to tap, and I'm basically going to start 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And notice I'm crossing over and coming back, so they're always opposite, my right and left hand. Depending on how, whatever is more comfortable, you can play counterclockwise with your left hand, and you can start the tap wherever you'd like. I recommend to everybody, practice it both ways. If you're playing it clockwise, practice playing it counterclockwise, because at one point, you're going to be, a common problem brush players have all the time is in the middle of a pattern, they don't know how to get back in. This is a great technique, is practice both, and you'll always feel comfortable. So here's a basic tap stroke. I'll show you again, is left hand first. I'm gonna cross over 1, 2, to 3, 4, to 1, 2, to 3, and I'm snapping a little bit with my right hand, if you notice that. 3, 4, for articulation. Hear that? 4. 1, 2, 3. A little faster. Faster. Okay? I'm going to play along to a little example here. Just so you guys can hear this with a musical example, a short little demonstration here. This is a tune called No Greater Love. Hope you dig it. This is a tap stroke. Cool.
Yeah.
So that's the basic tap stroke for any of you guys who mostly for beginners. That's a great way to kind of start out a building block. For those of you guys who are afraid of brushes, or maybe because you've never had much experience, take that beat and maybe start out slow, gradually build up, and I think that's a great place to start. And from there, you can really start to develop your sound.
Absolutely. And for those who are watching live, we do have a PDF along with this with a couple diagrams that Jason has provided. Obviously, because of the nature of them, we're not going to throw them on screen, but be sure to download the PDF. And for all you YouTubers watching right now live, which is quite a few of them, all the information is in the description in the video there. So as you were, man.
Yeah, so from there's a tap stroke. Again, that utilizes the tap and the sweep. The next stroke I'm going to show you really is where I think you really start to find your own voice, and I think you can really become, like I said, almost lyrical with the drum, and that's called a sweep stroke. I'm sure there are many names for it, but that's what I learned. I first learned this pattern from the great Ed Soph, who I was fortunate to study with at the University of North Texas, and basically, this pattern is very simple. It mostly utilizes the brush. It rarely leaves the head, and so the main pattern basically deals with the sweep, which again is the sustain, and a thup, where you're kind of putting the brush on the head. And I'll show you how we use it, kind of a little fun, ingenious way where you kind of get that thup in there. So. Basically, you're going to start, if this was the face of a clock, at 9 and 3, your right and left hand respectively. And you're going to, I think of my right hand as my time, keeping my time. And I just kind of move it almost like a half moon. So if you look at the diagram, you'll see it. Or here, I'm basically just moving in this motion where my hand is making a half moon kind of motion up to about 6 and 12 respectively. And the hands are always opposite. So starting here, my right will start at the top. I'm always leading with my left hand, or with my left and with my right. I'm always leading with my wrist is always first to come down, say if I'm here, and the first to leave. And same with at the top, first and first to come down, okay? And that to me gives you the most surface area you can get, I think, so you want as much fluidity as possible. If you're doing this correctly, it should sound like almost running water, very fluid. So again, but you don't want to hear a pulse if you can help it. And that's very hard to do. But what I'm trying to do here is I'm thinking for counts, I'm using the 12 o'clock on our face right here as 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So 1 and 3 is at 12 o'clock, 2 and 4 is at 6 o'clock on the face of a clock, if you imagine that on our drum head. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you want to be careful while you're doing this. When you're rounding the corner, you're just rounding the brush. You don't want to stop and then start again. You want that fluidity. And if you're doing it right, as your right hand is turning, your left hand is there to kind of round the corner, so you never have this break in that flow. And a lot of great brush players, Elvin Jones for one, used this pattern and just simply stuck a hi-hat in 2 and 4. And it worked like a charm. It's kind of a real cool technique where you're just using the sustain. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. And notice how fluid I'm trying to be and use as much of that drum head, as much surface area as possible to get as much sound without getting the brushes stuck in the hoop. So check this out. Here's where we really start to use that thup. I'm going to outline 2 and 4. So I'm going to add the thup at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. And notice how I'm adding that brush. As I turn the corner, I snap and add a little bit more of that brush. And that's that kind of really hip kind of way of adding that 2 and 4. And I'm just pressing as I'm turning. I'm snapping with my fingers. As you can see here, I'm snapping it as I turn the corner, and you get this real nice 1, 2, 3. So the brush never leaves the head, yet I'm getting this beautiful outline of our pulse. Okay? So a sweep and a thup on 2 and 4. Now from here, 2, 4, I can add quarter notes. So now I'm going to add 1 and 3 on the top of the drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. So every time I round the corner, I add a thup. A little faster. Back to a ballad tempo. And now I can add my left hand. I bring it in for that syncopation, that left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. There's our ride cymbal pattern. pretty deliberate, but I'm trying to get the point across so you can kind of, I would probably do it slightly, a little less obvious on the gig, but you get the picture. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You could do a shuffle. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Using my left hand, in and out. That kind of a motion. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's a sweep stroke, which is kind of hip.
Very cool, yeah.
If you play that right, a piano player will love you.
I bet.
Okay? They can
Yeah.
hear all the pulse, and yet it's very subtle, and you don't even need a hi-hat. And that's
Yeah.
kind of the fun of practicing this kind of a beat without having that stomping hat.
Well, it's crazy how full it sounds, how much rhythm there is just with a snare drum and, like I said, 2 brushes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me demonstrate that real quick again with another tune, if
Please
that's cool.
do. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just so you can see it in context, and I'll show you in a couple different tempos. This is a great tune, Body and Soul, so this is more kind of a ballad.
Okay.
Let's see here.
It's somewhere in there.
It's somewhere in here. Had it a second ago.
We will find it.
There we go. Cool?
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah.
a cool application of how you can use that that sweep stroke and how you can kind of bridge the gap. So very different than the tap stroke. And between the tap and the sweep stroke, you have a whole world to kind of begin and dive into. And I think that's a great jumping off point where you can really start to expand and experiment and kind of have fun with this and begin to find your voice.
Totally. I think it's great exercises for a beginner, even those who've been drumming for a while on a kit. Like me, I don't play a lot of brushes. I'm just looking at that. That looks harder than it seems harder than it looks, is what I'm trying to say. So
Sure.
you'd have to put some time into it, but I encourage you guys to go grab a pair of brushes. There's a lot you can do with it. Now, once you got those main strokes down and those patterns down, how do you get more creative? Like, I know you were showing me some really cool sounds that you got from your snare. Like, how do you get some unique sounds from these
Sure,
brushes?
absolutely. I think that's a great point. There are so many different sounds you can get. I think it's important to get these patterns down first and always think playing musically and serving the music. And with that in mind, there are some other really cool, interesting techniques that you can get that can pull different sounds that can be used for more soloistic or ways of kind of ornamenting different patterns or phrases. One of the most basic, which you've seen me using probably, is just what's called a nerve roll. Or a one-handed roll, where you're basically getting this roll with one hand, which is simply move around the drum, you can get different sounds. And this is a cool effect, man. You know, I've experimented where in college I would do a couple choruses, you know, of a tune and just keep this going while I kept time. And eventually the listener loses track that that's happening and you get this kind of cool effect. So that can be kind of fun. I've experimented doing it. Some people will do a one-handed roll this way. I kind of recently experimented using it this way. And I found that gave me a more consistent. Okay?
Yeah,
so,
no kidding.
Yeah, kind of a cool way where I'm kind of using my back or my index and my middle finger to kind of create that roll. And with the right hand, it's more of just kind of these probably my last two fingers, my pinky and ring finger, to kind of create that. So that's a one-handed roll, which is kind of fun. Another is basically what's called a rim roll, where you actually use the rim. And you can create this kind of rhythm. Put accents in there or not. And you can utilize that, say, with just a right hand with different accents. Or you can bring in your left hand, same thing, and put them together.
Yeah,
kind of a cool effect, you know.
Yeah.
And another cool effect is basically where you're actually rolling the brush like across the rim, where you get this kind of effect where you're bringing it across. And up until recently, a lot of jazz drummers would kind of use it as an effect of a very quick kind of. And more recently, I think it's kind of found its way into playing where you're actually using it as a rhythmic component, where you're getting. Kind of a different thing, and you can use your right hand, and the sky is the limit.
No kidding, yeah.
So kind of a fun sound to experiment with, and kind of breaks up that flow, especially if you're playing a sweep pattern. You just want to be careful you don't break up the flow too much and get too carried away with this.
Yeah.
And then another fun, different fun thing. Speaking of Ed Soph, Ed used to do this things, and I've never heard anyone else do it, so I'll credit to Ed, called the rip roll, which is where he would kind of hold the brush, cool. And you can do slow.
That is cool.
Cool. So I'm going to give that credit to Ed Soph, the rip roll there, kind of fun, and you can go nuts with that. Another cool roll that's kind of fun that some people are aware of, maybe not known so much, is called a butterfly roll, where you're actually hitting on top of and letting the brushes kind of float on top of the head.
Yeah, that one seems hard to find a place for it.
It's tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. All this, you kind of just, with brushes, you got to spend time and just. Come up with some different ideas. These, basically, this this next thing I'm going to show you is kind of something fun that I kind of stumbled upon by accident, and I've shown it to a bunch of my mentors, and I think it's something I accidentally came up with, which is kind of fun, and one of my students named it the Sutter Flutter. So this is one for the books. It's making its premiere here on Drumeo, but kind of fun. These brushes are my signature brushes. They're called the Sutter by Regal Tip. And when they came to me and asked me to make a brush, I was studying with the great Jeff Hamilton, who is probably one of the best brush players in the world, and who has a fantastic brush, if you haven't checked it out. It's a very thick gauge wire. When I say gauge, I mean the wire. And that's a big deal because the wire drastically affects the sound. And from studying with Jeff, I started to use his brushes, and I love them, but I missed a little of the flex that I was used to from the classic brush. And I asked them at Regal Tip, I said, they said, we want to make you a brush. And I said, well, how many, gauges of wire are there in they, between this thicker Hamilton that I love that gives a full sound, not a loud sound, but a full sound, and this thinner brush that just gives has great flex. And they said, there's 1 gauge. So they made me this brush. I said, that's my brush. And so it's a middle gauge brush. And the first time they sent me these prototypes, they nailed it. And I was sitting in my room and I started playing, and this little lick just kind of happened. So I think these brushes inspired that lick. So basically that lick is simply, you're rolling your hand around the brush, okay? So the brush, it's almost a 4-stroke roll. And that's the Sutter Flutter for all of those out there.
The Sutter
I've
Flutter.
never checked it out. Here it is.
Yeah.
So... And that's like a 4-stroke rough, okay?
No doubt.
Kind of hip, right? And the nice thing about that, if you do it right, you can kind of control the length of it. And it actually doesn't break the flow, which is the fun thing about it. You're just literally rolling the brush, just simply this. Okay? And if you do it right, it should be a 4-stroke. Okay? You can also do it with your left hand. So together, it's kind of like a roll,
no kidding.
right?
It
Kind of hip.
sounds so good.
That's just the left hand. Cool.
Very
so
cool.
That's kind of a fun effect, and it's something that I've kind of been experimenting with, and I urge you guys to take it and kind of run with it. And those are just a few of the millions and millions of options that you can kind of get into in sounds. And I'm constantly experimenting and just sitting down and just trying to just see where these take me, where the music takes me, and trying to come up with alternative sounds. Obviously, playing with the back of the brush, where you can actually use the, in different effects, where you can get different sounds and pressing, different sounds. So.
Yeah.
Million different things, so I urge you guys to take those and kind of run with them.
The Sutter Flutter.
The Sutter Flutter, man. You
love
heard
that.
it here. I've been saving it.
There you go.
So
That's
there you
great.
go. It's the Sutter Flutter. It's not just for breakfast anymore.
Very cool, man. Well, you're doing a lot of stuff in triplet feel,
Sure.
jazz, kind of waltz and stuff like that. What about if you want to be more like, or if you're into more rock and you want to apply brushes to that? Is there some patterns or some concepts that can bring like a backbeat or something?
Absolutely. What we've been talking about has all been triplet based.
Yeah.
Triplet based, if that's new to you. This is duple based, so groups of 2, 2, 4, 8, and so on. So with that, there's a simple pattern that I kind of came up with. And again, that just came from taking just the snare drum to jam sessions, to gigs, to sessions in college, starting at a young age, and really just going, okay, I'm going in with the snare drum, a stand, and a pair of brushes, and I got to play this gig no matter what happens. So duple time applies to more rock and roll, pop music, as well as Latin-based music, bossa novas, sambas, to be more specific as just a general, idea. Starting point. So the general concept, how I start, at least branch off with duple in the time we have, this is a great way to kind of, again, a point of departure to really apply this. Because in my philosophy, I feel like young drummers are constantly, and all drummers, not just young drummers, but all drummers are required to be able to provide a sound that maybe isn't the typical drum set sound. It's how can we make something sound fresh and new in this day and age? The drum set's been used, so constantly people are trying to play a drum set with all this stuff on the snare drum or a weird thing for a cymbal or an overdub, and I feel like, man, they just keep looking over this amazing tool.
I agree.
That's just waiting, and especially for some young drummer to just grab this brush and this tool and take it and create their own voice and create a whole new voice. Where wouldn't it be cool if you see the Grammys sometime and like half the dudes are just playing brushes?
No doubt.
Because it does lend itself to, say, drum and bass or more drumistic kind of almost machine-like sounds if you're hearing it and start experimenting with it. And hopefully I can demonstrate some of that. So with that said, here's a basic jumping off point, which would basically be the third actual pattern I'll show you guys today, which is basically for duple beats, whether it be pop or Latin and anything else that would fall under that. So basically what I do is I start on the drum, again around 9 and 3, and I basically just bring my right hand in and reverse the stroke. It's this simple, at least as a starting point. And you can practice rudiments. You can practice groupings of quarter notes. Again, the brush never leaves the head, so you can practice any kind of pattern, or 4-stroke roughs. You could take the syncopation book or any kind of exercise book and kind of go through there and just practice just really developing this pattern. So from the most obvious is if I was using this sweep pattern, we'll say this are sweeps. And I'm basically going to add my thup onto a bossa nova pattern. And what I mean by that is I'm bringing my brush in and throwing my brush out for those offbeats. So it's simply this. Starting here, keeping this kind of really pretty kind of, this is almost covering like a shaker. And then our clave or our cross stick is covered by that thup, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, very basic, but that's the beginning of, say, a bossa nova. And then from there, you can build on that. You can add rolls. Cool. So you get a whole world of possibilities, and then once you're playing that, you're not really missing that much. You're covering everything. If you want, you could cover your clave. Cool.
Very cool.
So that's a basic bossa idea, but then from there we could expand and say for a samba, a pattern I used a lot, and I'm gonna demonstrate that in a minute with our one of our final tunes, is with the bossa nova or with the samba. You can basically take a cascara pattern, right? Which basically in my right hand is simply. And fill in with sweeps each one of those the offbeats from that cascara. So basically, I'm going to play the cascara as almost as a as a thup, and my left hand will sweep all the inner beats, which would sound like this.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, so it kind of swings and has its own vibe. And again, if you're looking for an alternate sound, which so often is the case I find with a lot of young drummers, a lot of my students go into the studio and the last thing a producer wants is them to actually play a conventional beat or a conventional drum set. The sky's the limit here, you know? And you can play brushes on a djembe. You can play, which sounds really amazing, with the thup on a djembe. You get this beautiful sub-low. The sky's the limit, you know, you can just go and go, you know. So I urge you to experiment on other sound sources, you know, that you can play on. It sounds great on, you know, on a floor tom, kind of breaking it up, putting a floor tom. In this case here, I have a lower drum, so you can get this kind of experiment with different sounds, and we'll do that. I'll show you that in a second. So that's a basic idea for a couple Latin beats. For rock and pop music, on one drum, you just come up with a pattern. And again, you're utilizing all these sounds.
Yep.
You're utilizing the tap, the thup, and the sweep, and you're going to outline your bass drum and snare drum pattern. And in there, those sweeps will create this feeling of a hi-hat pattern or a shaker, if it's done correctly. And so basically, like I say, take a basic rock beat. That's one way of doing it. It's a little choppy, maybe not that interesting. So spice it up.
Yeah, cool. Man, that's awesome.
And if you add over here, you can almost kind of create some different Cool?
Very cool. Yeah. So I was hoping you'd play that other beauty sitting there.
We'll get into that. But, you know, and for kind of something almost electronic, like a drum and bass kind of thing, you could just...
Bravo.
Cool?
Yeah.
That's just messing around, man. There's a million things you can do, and I'm just starting to kind of experiment with that. So I urge, you know, all the viewers to kind of get out there and experiment. Add 3 drums. I'm starting to experiment with a 10-inch drum here to kind of with a coated head, and just go to town, utilize sweeps and all those different options.
Well, the coolest thing here is this is inspiring. Makes me want to pick up my brushes again and just go and try stuff out on just a snare drum. You know, you've given quite a few cool little patterns, but sounds too that you can get, and it's something that, like I said, I don't practice enough, so I got to get back into my brush work. But that's very cool.
Cool.
we are running low on time.
Yeah, I'm going to finish up with one more tune. Or do you have some?
I just got a couple questions,
Great.
if that's cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah, we got a couple that have come in through the chat. Now, for those watching on Facebook and YouTube Live right now, we obviously accept questions, but only from our Edge members. So please feel free to join Drumeo, and you can ask Jason Sutter direct questions. We're also doing a Q&A live with you tomorrow, kind of like an interview / Q&A tomorrow for all the Edge members, so you can get your questions here if we miss them. And also, we have filmed a couple courses that are exclusive to Edge members with you out here, and that was really going to be amazing. I was also going to say we also filmed a cool solo with you on a pizza box.
Cool.
We got a lot of stuff coming out from Jason, so I know everyone's here saying this guy is killing it. It's amazing. A lot of comments that are positive here. So here's a quick question for you. This one is from Gio. He says, "Hey Jason, does the snare tuning high or low help or hinder the sound of brushes, or does that even matter?"
Great question, Gio. I would say certainly it does, and certainly the drum. The snare wires are affect, I think, it's important to have a quality, everything, the bottom head, the width, the thickness. In this case, this is an Ambassador X, this is an Emperor, and both of them work pretty well, both Remo. And generally, I have also a skin tone drum head that Remo makes is really great for sound. Generally, I like the drums as this Chief Donette is tuned a little higher, as you can tell. Response out of it, so that definitely I think helps and lends itself to more of the articulation for faster rolls. But as you can tell, it's tuned pretty low, and it sounds pretty hip too.
Yeah.
So I would say find something that feels best to you and run with it. And again, make that your voice, make that your sound. But for me, I think the sky's the limit. I would just say whatever feels best to you.
Very cool. Here's a question from Saddams. He says, "Hey Jason, I really love the depth of the sound that you're getting with those brushes." He says, "This is the first time I've ever experienced any kind of lesson on the brushes like this, so very well done. I noticed you have a variation on what you call the traditional grip with your left hand. Is that something you'd recommend to emulate when you're approaching brushes?"
I play match grip for almost everything, Saddam, and for brushes, it's one thing where I played a lot of traditional grip in college with drum corps and jazz and even rock drumming. But, for me, there's something about that left-handed, that traditional approach that I find I can't quite let go on brushes. So I think there are a lot of great match grip players, but I would say, for me, I've changed my grip a little bit. I used to play a lot more below. For me, it's just a matter of being able to get as much of that flow to get as much sustain out of the drum as possible. But for me, I recommend experimenting with it and again, I'm at the point with students and players where whatever feels best for you. There is no right or wrong way. But for me, traditional is it's a traditional art form, even though I'm trying to push it to another place. So for me, I'm just I can't seem to move away from that traditional grip on brushes.
It's working great for you, so no need to change.
Thanks, trying.
Tommy D has a question for you. Asks, he says, "My brushes have a lip or a bend at the end of them. Is it best to use that pointing down into the drum sweeps or flat so that more of the brush is in contact with the head?"
I think the idea for that, to answer your question, is that it's supposed to be the flat end is up, because the whole concept is if you play brushes a lot, in some cases, if you only use one side, you get this flat side. I don't prefer that because, again, in moving the brushes and trying to do more than just keeping this simple straight pattern that I'm experimenting with, I try to flip the brushes and keep it so that I never have a flat side, because I like the brushes because I think that messes with my balance when I'm trying to snap the brush, what I was talking about before, to get those tap strokes. So to me, when the brush is bent, we're going to make them very mushy for articulation. So personally, I try to keep the brushes straight, and if you do have brushes that are turned aside, are pointed up, I would keep them pointed up, because that's probably what they're for, is to get more of a sweep and articulation, or less of an articulation, more of a sweep.
Very cool. 2 2 last points before we wrap up. This question is from Bryce, but I'll quickly answer it. He says, earlier in the lesson, you did a one-handed roll with brushes. I'd love to see how you do that again. Just make sure you check this lesson in the archives. You are an Edge member, so you'll be able to see it probably tomorrow or the next day, so you can watch it as many times as you want. Dane has the last question, though, for you. He says, hey, Jason, and hey, Dave. As I am still just learning and starting out, I am still trying to work on what style of drumming I want to do, but jazz might be what I want to get into. That being said, what is the best brush to use? Thank you very much, and great lesson.
Well, I mean, what can I say but the Sutter, man? I love that question.
No
you get a free pair of these, man, when I get to see you, if I ever meet you. Anyway, no, I really do. These brushes have fallen from heaven, and they're not, a lot of brushes are made with different handles, widths, lengths, but the key thing to this Sutter model, which, by the way, Carol Collado named, her father named the 5.8, but Carol named this the Sutter. That was her name, not my idea. But they're the only blue brushes out there, so ask for them. They're called the Sutter by Regal Tip, and they're blue, so if you find them, that's mine. And basically, this gauge really, to me, changes the game, because they really give a full sound, but yet they have articulation because of they're thicker than the classic brush, which most brushes are knockoffs of, and I think I can say that pretty freely. The Hamilton has this full, beautiful sound, and I love those brushes. Check them out, the Jeff Hamilton. But this brush, I feel like, is the perfect medium weight brush because it has the best of both worlds. So I'm not just saying it to sell my brushes. I mean, for me, it's like they feel great, and I love that so many great jazz drummers and rock drummers alike really have gravitated towards these and found this perfect middle ground where they say, wow, I can't believe you beat me to it, because I've been looking for that sound. So that's what I'd recommend. So check them out. They're called the Sutter by Regal Tip, and they're the only blue brushes out there. So thanks so much for your question. Yeah.
Awesome, man.
Very cool, man.
That's it.
Wonderful. Maybe I'll play us out with one more,
Please
Jim?
play us out. Before you do, though, thanks everyone for watching. There was a ton of viewers here on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and of course our Drumeo Edge members. Thank you for coming out, man. Seriously.
I love it. It's so cool to be here, man. I'm like sitting across from you. I've watched so many Drumeos, and I'm like realizing, like, I'm here, man.
Yeah,
I'm on Drumeo, Mom. Check me out.
That's so good.
Playing brushes, just snare drums.
Yeah. Well, you killed it on
Yeah.
just snare drums. I don't think we've had a lesson where it's just been a snare drum like that, and you've been able to fill it up very, very nicely. So,
Well, thanks to everybody for watching. Thanks to you so much for everything. Thanks to Jared and Ron and everybody here. Thanks for having me, man. I love Canada. I love Drumeo, and I love drums. So it's a perfect combo.
you're always welcome back here, and you're going to play us out with a song called Caravan right
You
now.
got it, man. Kind of utilizing these duple beats and hopefully putting both these drums together.
Awesome. We'll see you guys all later.
Thanks again, you guys.